Hello and welcome. In today's video, we are going to discuss the peculiar ways in which our thoughts function and how most people are unaware of this, even if it's staring us right in the face every second of every minute of every waking hour. Automatic thoughts, often described as a persistent inner dialogue, function as a constant overlay to the present moment, drawing us away from experiencing reality as it unfolds. These thoughts, a hallmark of the human mind's ego-driven state, are deeply explored in Eckhart Tolle's works. The interplay between this mental noise and our ability to inhabit the present moment reveals a mechanism that not only disconnects us from the now, but also perpetuates cycles of stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. Tolle goes so far as to describe this state as an addiction to thoughts, which is not hard to understand in relation to the mechanics of addiction. He describes addiction as a compulsive behavior that offers temporary relief or satisfaction, but ultimately perpetuates suffering. At its core, addiction arises from a deep-seated inner discomfort and a desire to escape the present moment. This discomfort stems from an identification with the ego and the mind's unfulfilled needs, which drive a continuous cycle of seeking external validation or experiences to fill an inner void. In this context, Tolle compares this to how automatic thoughts are a compulsive and unconscious need to think continuously. This mental overactivity stems from the mind's tendency to identify with its own content, creating an endless stream of thoughts that are difficult to silence. Tolle emphasizes that this addiction feels necessary because it gives the illusion of control and purpose, as though thinking incessantly about problems can resolve them or prevent future challenges. Yet it disconnects us from the present, where real solutions and clarity emerge. Instead of addressing reality, the mind remains trapped in patterns of worry, regret, or planning, perpetuating a cycle of dissatisfaction. The constant mental noise becomes a default state. Breaking free from this addiction involves recognizing thought patterns as they arise and understanding that they do not define who you are. By becoming aware of this tendency and focusing on the present moment, we can disrupt this cycle and access a deeper state of peace beyond the mind's compulsive narratives. This is also where real solutions arise. Admittedly, this is a difficult concept to grasp. We often have strong memories of painful experiences of losing control, and it can therefore be very difficult to accept that the mind's false sense of control is something that we have to give up if we want to feel truly free while being able to rest in the knowing that we are carried through life by something higher. The best way to approach this process is not to try and force it, but gradually lean into the knowing that there is a higher state to operate from, that you are part of infinite consciousness forever, that you are going to live forever, and that as your awareness expands, you will more and more naturally align yourself with the natural flow of life. This might feel very abstract right now, but be assured that this is a very real state that can be accessed, and it will be easier and easier to do so the more you start questioning what you really know about reality, because whatever this human experience is, it's not limited to what is readily available to the five senses, and it's certainly not what you are told that it is. At the core of automatic thoughts lies the ego, the constructed sense of self that is primarily rooted in past experiences and future projections. Tolle argues that the ego's survival depends on identification with thoughts, memories, and imagined scenarios. This identification fosters a disconnection from the present because the ego thrives in the dimensions of time, the past and future, but cannot sustain itself in the immediacy of the now. By clinging to grievances, regrets, or anxieties about the future, the ego ensures that your attention remains tethered to its domain. This can be hard to see. The thoughts are often unconscious, and yet they affect how we feel and act. We identify with them and mistake them for us and what they tell us for reality. Seeing through this dynamic is a crucial step in the awakening journey, and you need to reflect on this, observe your inner life and your behavior, and apply this knowledge to your own experiences to get a firm grip on how this works. Otherwise, this will just be empty words. One thing that you will notice as you observe yourself is that the ceaseless mental activity of the ego-driven mind produces a voice in the head that narrates, judges, and analyzes continuously. This voice does not reflect your true self, but rather a conditioned mental pattern. Tolle emphasizes that much of this thought activity is not only repetitive and unoriginal, but also detrimental, as it magnifies feelings of lack, dissatisfaction, and fear. For instance, a passing thought about an incomplete task might cascade into a flood of anxiety-ridden narratives, pulling you further from the present moment. If you pay close attention to how automatic thoughts operate, you will notice that thoughts cannot survive as long as you're fully conscious. In these short gaps, you will feel a sense of peace and calm inside. However, in their normal state, our minds cannot remain fully conscious for more than a few seconds, which is another thing that you will quickly notice when you pay attention to your mental activity. When you're fully conscious, there is a moment of silence and, furthermore, that as soon as you lose your awareness, the mind is flooded again. This cycle can potentially be broken in a split second, but for most people, this requires a long process where they drift in and out of awareness. The good news is that, according to Tolle, once this process has started, it can only be delayed, but never stopped. Another layer of this mechanism involves emotional energy. Thoughts and emotions are interconnected. When thoughts about past pain or future uncertainty arise, they trigger emotional responses. These emotions then reinforce the thoughts, creating a feedback loop, where the emotions in turn give rise to even more thoughts. This loop ensures that you remain caught in cycles of negative emotions and mental noise. This is similar to the process where an external event first triggers an emotion, which then gives rise to thoughts, which in turn gives rise to even more emotions, and so on. The mind's addiction to time compounds this issue. Psychological time, as Tolle describes it, involves identification with either past events or future possibilities. The mind continually oscillates between these states, distracting you from what is real, this moment. This mental fixation on time generates a sense of incompleteness, as though fulfillment exists somewhere other than where you are now. The habit of anticipating the future or revisiting the past sustains the illusion that happiness, peace, or wholeness is contingent upon external circumstances yet to come or long gone. The truth is that the only satisfaction lies in surrendering to the present moment, and this requires de-identification with thoughts and emotions, and acceptance of whatever is present in your immediate experience. To fully understand this requires direct experience of what it means to live and act from the present moment, not being burdened by painful memories of the past or future worries. What is important to realize is that the past only exists as words and images, and that it's only kept alive by our thoughts about it, and the ways it affects us in the present moment, and that the future is not yet here, and only exists as an infinite amount of probabilities. We are furthermore not good at predicting the future because we have insufficient data, and because our judgment is clouded by our emotions, our memories of the past, and our interpretations of them. This last point is important. It is mainly how we interpret the past that determines how we treat it. For instance, if you experienced failure in the past and interpreted it as proof of inadequacy, this belief can unconsciously dictate present choices. You might avoid opportunities out of fear, reinforcing the sense of limitation. This avoidance creates a self-fulfilling cycle where the future mirrors the past. Eckhart Tolle explains that these patterns arise when we identify with mental narratives about the past. By bringing awareness to these interpretations and letting go of attachment outcomes, you can break free, act differently in the present, and create a new future. Furthermore, the mind often seeks identity in external things, possessions, relationships, achievements, or roles. This identification extends the reach of automatic thoughts by amplifying concerns over losing what you have or not attaining what you desire. When you are consumed by these thoughts, your perception becomes clouded. Instead of directly experiencing life, you interpret it through the lens of the ego's agenda. This diminishes your capacity to engage with the present, as attention is absorbed in mental constructs rather than reality. Breaking free from the grip of automatic thoughts requires cultivating presence, a state Tolle describes as the realization of being beyond thought. Presence arises when you become aware of the present moment without mental interference. This awareness interrupts the stream of automatic thoughts and creates a space in which the ego cannot operate effectively. In this state, you observe thoughts as they arise without becoming identified with them. Over time, this practice diminishes the ego's control. It's important to recognize this identification with thoughts, as it's not as easy as realizing that we are not the voice that is constantly speaking inside our heads. Because even if we have taken this important step, we still get triggered into identification all the time. It's not that what the automatic thoughts say is always untrue, it's that there is no discernment. What you need to do is become aware when you've started to believe what your thoughts are saying without questioning it. This is part of identification. Unconsciously, you think that the voice in your head is telling you the truth because you believe the voice to be you, even if you, on another level, know better. If you wish to delve deeper into this, Tolle has a simple method that will temporarily break the stream of thoughts. The method is simply to ask yourself, what will my next thought be, and then listen for the answer. This question brings your attention fully into the present moment, creating a gap in the stream of mental activity. As you wait for a thought to arise, you step into the role of an observer rather than a participant in your mind. In this state of heightened awareness, the flow of thoughts pauses, revealing a space of stillness. Repeating this practice can help you disidentify from the thinking mind and access the quiet presence behind your thoughts. There are 4 interesting things you can observe in this practice. One is that, as has already been mentioned, if you're like most people, it will only take a few seconds at most for you to go unconscious, whereupon your mind is flooded with automatic thoughts again. Next, it is interesting to note how thoughts disappear when you pay attention to them, and, in connection to this, the fact that you need to go unconscious for the thoughts to return. Finally, it's interesting to note that thoughts, even though you can direct them to some extent, are not something that you produce. They happen. All of these observations will tell you a lot about how the mind works if you reflect upon them. And again, you are reminded that it's important to take an active approach to the content you consume here and apply it to your own experiences. Tolle suggests practical methods to disengage from the dominance of automatic thoughts. One powerful approach is anchoring attention in the body. By directing awareness to physical sensations, such as the breath or the inner energy field of the body, you withdraw focus from the mind. This practice not only calms mental activity, but also reconnects you with the now, as the body exists only in the present moment. There is a specific technique for anchoring yourself in the present moment by feeling the inner body, the energetic field that is inside you all the time and which grows stronger the more you focus on it. Begin by directing your attention inward to your hands. Close your eyes if it helps, and you're in a setting where it's possible to do so, but don't let this be a hindrance. Then focus on sensing the subtle energy or aliveness in your hands without moving them. You might notice a tingling or warmth. This is your inner body awareness. Once you feel it clearly, shift your attention to your feet, following the same process of sensing the aliveness there. It's important to not just think about doing this, but actually engaging with the exercise on an experiential level. Gradually expand your focus to include the rest of your body, moving through your arms, legs, torso, and head, until you perceive your entire body as a unified field of energy. This practice roots you deeply in the present, quieting the mind by withdrawing attention from thoughts and grounding it in the living reality of your body. The more you practice, the easier it becomes to remain present and connected to your being. This is another important realization, namely that you can quiet the mind and anchor yourself in the present moment by consciously shifting your focus, and you can experiment with this quite a lot by, for example, being consciously aware of how food tastes or how a cat's fur feels under your fingers and palms when you're petting it, just to name a few examples. Another key practice involves noticing the gaps between thoughts. Tolle explains that thought activity is not continuous. Moments of stillness exist between one thought and the next. By shifting awareness to these gaps, you access the underlying stillness that represents your true nature. These moments of stillness serve as portals into presence and help dissolve the illusion that you are your thoughts. Furthermore, what you will notice is that as you relax more and more into the present moment, these gaps will become longer and longer. As said in the beginning, once this process has started, it will run its course. The question is just how much you kick and scream before you surrender to it. This leads us nicely to the question of acceptance, which is another pathway to freedom from automatic thoughts. Resistance to what is, whether in the form of judgment or denial, perpetuates mental noise. If you pay attention, you will notice that when a triggering event occurs, there is first the event and the immediate reaction to it. This is spontaneous. It just happens. But then your mind keeps the event alive by thinking about it and ruminating over it. Acceptance involves fully acknowledging the present moment, regardless of its content, without mental commentary. This radical embrace of now undercuts the ego's narrative and allows a deeper sense of peace to emerge. Tolle explains that breaking free from mental commentary requires becoming fully present by observing the mind without engaging with it. Instead of resisting or judging the thoughts that arise, you practice witnessing them with neutral awareness. This creates a space between you and the stream of mental activity, disrupting its automatic hold. Even though this is, in a sense, an effortless practice, it's nonetheless difficult in the beginning, and the mind will resist in the beginning. There are two key components here. The most important is that you need to practice remembering to remain aware enough to notice what is going on. In other words, the most important part is simply to train your memory to recognize when you go unconscious and go into habitual ways of resisting what is. Next, you need to firmly realize that the resistance is not towards anything real. What is happening is already happening, and no resistance in the world will change that. In other words, the present moment is what it is whether you resist it or not. Admittedly, it's not easy to cultivate the habit of non-resistance, but the more you can do so, the less painful the challenging experiences will be. This is something that most people struggle with a lot, so don't feel bad if this is difficult for you, but be that as it may, it is what it is. In both The Power of Now and A New Earth, Tolle underscores that the awareness of automatic thoughts is transformative in itself. The simple act of recognizing that you are caught in thought shifts your consciousness. In that moment of recognition, a separation arises between the thinker and the awareness observing the thinker. This shift marks the beginning of de-identification from the ego and the opening of a deeper connection to the present moment. In summary, automatic thoughts act as a veil over the present, driven by the ego's need to sustain itself through identification with the past and future. The important first step is to become aware of the activities of the mind, as most people are not, even though their minds are filled with an incessant stream of thoughts from when they wake up till they go to bed. These thoughts generate emotional reactivity and create cycles of psychological time. Our minds constructs around time, as opposed to clock time, which is just time used for practical purposes. We have a whole video about psychological time and clock time, and there will be a video about it at the end screen in just a moment. This dysfunctional activity of the mind fosters a sense of incompleteness, yet by cultivating awareness, presence, and acceptance, you can transcend this mental entrapment. Through practices like observing the breath, noticing gaps between thoughts, getting into contact with the inner body, and embracing the now without resistance, you reclaim your connection to life as it unfolds. In this state of presence, the mind becomes a tool rather than a tyrant, and the richness of the present moment reveals itself fully. With that being said, let's now conclude the video by bringing us back to the beginning. It's a very peculiar fact that we have this never-ending activity inside our heads that we are usually more or less unaware of, whose content we are usually more or less unaware of, which we still often believe to be us, and which affects how we feel, speak, and act. It's there, in plain sight, all of our waking hours. And yet, most people don't pay attention to it, let alone reflect upon it, what it means, and the strangeness of it all. Think about it. Think about it. You've now reached the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for your time.